Morning, everyone. We'll start promptly at 11 a.m. Arizona time. If at all possible, and you can hear us, please put something into the chat pod. Say good morning. Yes, that's perfect, Gloria. Greetings, Tom. Are you interested in activating your microphone today?
Maybe Gloria can too. That would be very cool.
All right, let me enable your rights here. Gloria, if you're interested in trying out your audio, I'd be willing to activate. All right, give me one moment. You should see some changes on your screen after I activate. There might be a couple things you need to do, Gloria. You'll see a prompt for you to allow the microphone to connect to Adobe Connect. And then at the top black ribbon, you should see a microphone icon. That should be green. If it isn't green, click on it. Anybody else out there would like to try to activate their microphone?
Is Gloria activated? It's so cool.
She is activated. She commented that please don't let me hold you up. And that's no problem here. We're actually, this is part of the exercise.
Yes, this is part of our purpose today.
Get more interactivity onto these webinars. So we'll be glad to assist you in any way to get that going. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning, John. Are we ready?
I think we are. It's 1 past the hour, and it looks like we have some people that were on for the other webinars. You think I should go over any kind of navigation?
I think so, because we might have some new people.
Okay. So what we have here, folks, is the Adobe Connect webinar screen. You'll see pods in front of you. This is right now, a listen-only webinar for those who choose not to participate on the audio level. You can put your comments or questions in the chat pod to the far right of your screen. We'll be monitoring whatever comments or questions come up, and then I'll be able to deliver those to Carol. You'll see a files pod at the center bottom of your screen. Those reflect the 3 PDFs of all the PowerPoints this week. So feel free to download any one of those, and they'll just download directly to your desktop. And you can access them there. If there are any questions or any kind of help, just put it into the comment area. We'll be monitoring that. For that, happy Friday, everyone. And I'm going to hand it over to Carol, and we'll move right in.
Thank you, John. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Promising Practices for Providing AIVRS Services, and this is the follow-up session. This is the third session of 3 this week. The first was the actual webinar on Tuesday, followed by our community practice yesterday, and then the follow-up today. If there's anyone new on the webinar that hasn't been on previously this week, I'll do a brief introduction. I'm Carol Bergquist. I'm the director of Project Visions, which is a tribal vocational rehabilitation program on the Hannibal Indian Community Reservation in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. And I've been the director of Project Visions since we were first funded in 1995, and I've worked for the Hannibal community since 1989. Welcome. I'm here today on campus. It's a beautiful sunny day in Arizona after a bit of rain this week. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to be here all week working with the AIVRS Tech staff. And today online is also Lee Gassioma, Dr. Gassioma, and he's live and he will be participating also. And Suzanne Malson is here with me in our high-tech studio with John, and she also has access to the microphone here, so she can be participating as well. The purpose for our meeting today is to discuss any of the concepts, any questions or ideas that anybody has from the webinar, Promising Practices webinar on Tuesday, and also from our community of practice yesterday, for those that were on yesterday. And then we'll also talk toward the end about how we can continue our conversation with some ideas for continuing the community of practice or other ideas that you might have. As a director, I really found this type of interaction very valuable to be on the other webinars, and also other interactions we've had, like with the talking circles, which AIVRS Tech has done 4 of those this year. So I'm just wondering, to get started here, if there's anybody out there that has any questions or comments from, I know everybody wasn't on live on Tuesday, but many of you watched the webinar recording. Are there any questions or comments from Tuesday? Hey, John, will let me know when things start coming in. I know that Tom and Gloria are both on live, and they were 2 of the 10 directors that were interviewed to gather information for the webinar on promising practices. And I don't know, John, if there's anybody else out there that signed in that you recognize from?
Throughout the week, we've had people participate. Jim's been on, Dana's been on. Someone new, maybe Tony Leha.
Okay. And maybe while we're getting going here, people could type in with their name and what, if they are with one of the TVR programs, maybe which program that is and what your position is. And is there anybody that was also one of the 10 people interviewed in addition to Tom and Gloria?
Gloria says it was excellent content.
Okay, thank you, Gloria. You helped make it that way. I would like to just throw it out there to Tom and Gloria and ask them how they felt about being 2 of the people that participated in the interviews.
This is Tom. You know, I sort of work in isolation in an isolated area of the country, like
Suzanne.
most of us do, and so it was nice to be able to.
Go ahead, Tom.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
Thank you.
You know, it's nice to have the opportunity to. Okay. It was nice to have the opportunity to talk about what we do and it sort of gives it some validity when you can share it with somebody else. And I don't often have the opportunity, with the exception when the Alaska directors meet. So it was nice to be able to share it with other people.
Well, I know Tom and I were quite chatty. It was late afternoon his time and into the evening on my time zone, and it was really, I just enjoyed talking with you, Tom, to hear about all the different ways that you had implemented your program there way up north in Alaska, and you just shared so much. That was great. Thank you. How about you, Gloria?
You're welcome.
I don't know, maybe is Gloria live? Jen?
She's typing.
Oh, okay.
Jim wanted to introduce himself. Jim Allen, Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor, Lower Elha Column Tribe, Port Angeles, Washington. Thanks for having me here. And then Gloria has asked to please repeat.
Okay. Welcome, Jim. Thank you for introducing yourself. Hi, Gloria. I'm wondering if you have any observations or comments you'd like to share about being one of the participants that was interviewed for information to put into our webinar. How did you feel about it, and how was the process? Is there an issue, John, or no?
No, they're typing right now.
Okay. I can't see what's happening. So I guess Gloria's typing something in, so she's not live then.
No, she's not live
Okay.
audio, but she's typing something in. And then you can just see sort of activity happen here. That means that someone's typing.
Okay. All right. That's pretty tiny print for my eyes.
All right, we have Gloria, and she says, I was glad to be included. It made me step back and review our program, etc., what we do and how we do it, what works and what had not worked so well. And Gail says hello.
Hi, Gail. Welcome back. Gloria, thank you. I know Gloria and I were talking and doing the interview, and then she said, I could do this more easily if I could just write in my answers to the questions. And so she did that and sent them to me, and then I looked those over, and then we talked again to go over some of the other points. And that was another way of doing the interview that happened to work. So we were really flexible, and if we continue this process with more interviews, we've even got more ideas. Up on this, whoops, I'm gonna put that screen up, John. One of the things that was kind of the crux of the webinar was the implementation of our programs, especially when we were first developing and creating the programs. And our model at that time was, the only model we had to go by was the state VR model, which of course is that largely urban, bureaucratic model that we all wanted to change and make much more native friendly. I'm wondering if we could have some comments about how that seemed to work for them, or their ideas they might have after listening to some of the comments from the directors.
I have a technical thing from Gail, no audio or video, nothing being shared. Hosts and participant show. So Gail, I would suggest logging out, exiting the browser, and then clicking on the URL again and see where it goes from there.
While we're waiting here, I'm going to pull up the table. This was a table that we created. This is kind of the main comments of some of the things that were different in terms of what we tried to do on the tribal side and compared to what state VR, public VR is like. And we had reorganized this table since we had first showed the table on Tuesday. We kind of organized it into 3 categories. And the first one were things that were external to the organizations and how we kind of operated, that sort of thing. And you can see from the screen some of the things that were identified, like, you know, being close in proximity to the community, have all open categories. We knew we had less dollars. We had to follow the regulations. And I'm wondering if anybody has any comments of anything that might appear in this first part for external regulations that guided us.
I have a comment from Gloria, and she states, it is critical that we have data, track it, share it, and how we do it. Only then can we have the best promising practices. It can be documented and we all have evidence-based practice, but until Carol took this on, there really was nothing.
So Gloria, you're talking about the getting information from each other in terms of documenting how we implemented this program? And I'm wondering if we have some suggestions of how we might continue with this documentation.
In the meantime, we have a introduction by Tony Leha.
Welcome, Tony.
VR job developer counselor for Siletz Tribal VR in Salem, Oregon, 11 county catchment area in Northwest Oregon. I'm looking forward to seeing what the local TBR programs are doing for culturally sensitive and job development and economic growth on tribal lands in the public sector.
Thank you, Tony.
And Gloria responds by saying, getting data and practices to you and follow-up. Program sharing, which you talked about yesterday.
Okay. In terms of the program sharing, this is one opportunity we had to do this type of a webinar. And, you know, for me, as being a person that has been a director in the program for a while and really started the program at Hannahville in a vacuum without much input except my RFP and the response that we made to it. And I'm wondering if there were some ways now that we could take the expertise of people that have been directors or are directors and have them work or share that with new directors or newly hired directors in programs that have been going on for a while. There's always a delay while we're waiting for people to type. So
Carol?
It's a little awkward. Yes.
Carol?
Yeah. Yes. Tom?
This is Lee.
Oh, Lee. Hi, Lee.
Can you share with the group? Yes. Can you share with the group if you have any plans of preparing a formal report to share with the program directors who participated in this survey? Also, do you plan to conduct like a presentation, let's say at KNR, to share with the audience and the programs the steps, the processes that you took to accomplish a task of this sort?
Well, thank you, Lee. Yes, I have other plans to continue. I'd like to take the information and write up some type of at least a short report that would be readable and read by people, as well as doing other things like a presentation at KNR. I have asked about being on the agenda. I haven't received any reply whether I'm accepted or not, but I'd like to do something that would continue the conversations with directors at our KNR conference in San Diego in November. And I think many directors will be there. And in doing the process with talking, I just had time to talk with the first 10 people that contacted me. Other people have contacted me and wanted to participate, but there wasn't enough time before the webinar was going to be live. So I would like to figure out a way to follow up with people And I don't know if we'd continue with the same questions or maybe come up with another set of questions and take it to the next level. I mean, I have a personal commitment to continue this conversation because after working with tribal VR for 21 years and watching people retire and leave for other reasons or even pass, that information is lost when that director might leave that program. And for many of us, it's the directors that initially were kind of the mainstay of the program, not to discount any of the contributions of counselors or other staff, but that's almost another avenue to pursue.
We have a couple comments.
Carol, this is Lee again. That's a great idea as some individuals or programs are hesitant or the fear factor kicks in when we mention research of any type. And for you to be there in person and walk them through the process that you use, I believe will eliminate some of the fear, but more importantly, the program directors and staff will have a better understanding that it can be done and not using a complicated process, and also giving back to the tribal communities that participate in the research activities.
As I tried to demonstrate in our webinar on Tuesday, the tools of my trade were simply my cell phone and some colored pencils and a survey form. Nothing very complicated. And it's qualitative research, so there's not statistics that I'm adding up, so there was no statistical tasks that went along with it. There may be certainly something we would do in that order in the future where people might want to submit information. But I think it's really important that we document the implementation and also the workings of the program. That's kind of the next piece I think we might want to look at too, would be what are people actually doing? I did gather some more information in the survey than I've been able to have the time yet to report in terms of some practices, but I think that could be, we could get some more information about that. That's not yet complete. One thing I did find that people were really ready to talk and they were excited to talk about their programs. I think we are all very proud of what we've done. And I think the conversation to me is the easiest way to do it. Most of us are kind of put off with the task of writing a report or something. We do our annual reports, but something that would be kind of more taxing to people. But I haven't met a director yet that doesn't like to talk. So that would be, I think, a really effective way if we can do the conversations. Some ideas we've talked about to keep things going is even like a monthly director's call with AIVRTech, maybe facilitating, similar to what we do with RSA, because everybody seems to like that format. And maybe then record what people say and work that into a written text that could be shared. Are other ideas coming in? I see some typing.
Jim, adding to the earlier conversation, my office is in the tribe's Heritage Center. Artifacts and tribal art is on display here. 2 blocks away is our DVR partners. We are fortunate to have a good relationship with the 2 VRCs there.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Jim. We did talk about the importance of location, and I think yours sounds absolutely ideal, being in your Heritage Center. We were located in the hub of our community and in the tribe's oldest building. We were honored, but I think it was the only building nobody else wanted at the time. But we've since made it accessible and fixed it up, and it's quite nice now. And but I think the location for the program is something, and we also, other directors shared about the importance of decorating and making things Native friendly and comfortable for people when they came through the door.
And Gloria says, way back, I felt totally lost. Now there is so much support and camaraderie. We could be mentors. I still reach out to other directors before contacting my Fed officer.
Gloria and I first met long ago on the way to a KNAR meeting on a rainy night in Mississippi in the airport. Remember that, Gloria? And we have bonded ever since. Hannibal was there. We were there with a car, and there reservations for their car were messed up in some way. So they jumped in. I got a bigger car, and they jumped in our car, and we drove I think it was 50 or 60 miles to Mary Maruvia's site on the Choctaw Reservation in Philadelphia. And on the way there was a accident. I thought it was raining so hard it was hard to see, and so I swerved around the accident and the police cars and moved on ahead, and all of a sudden there was a police car behind me and pulled me over, and I had actually run a sobriety checkpoint. So we were in deep trouble. And they asked us where we were from, and Dan and I in the front seat said Michigan, and Gloria and Moss and her crew in the back seat said Minnesota, and they said, you don't even know where you're from? I thought I was heading to a Mississippi jail. So we have a really close bond since then.
She adds that Moss and I still giggle about the night that you blew through the police stop.
It's only one of many stories.
I did have to skip her earlier comment, but
Okay.
she's saying conference calls sound great. I feel we would be a little less apprehensive to voice options, ask questions, etc. on this type of call.
Okay, great. Well, that's a good idea then. Anybody else weighed in on anything, other ideas?
Tony has a comment, and it states, how actively involved were the VR directors in reaching out to the state VR in providing cross-cultural training program development and expertise sharing with state VR, etc.? Thank you for providing personal stories of bridging the cultural gap across state and tribal VR.
I will share what I did in Michigan, and maybe, I don't know, other directors that are on, but Tom could share and Gloria could share, because they have both talked about very strong relationships. In fact, one of the things that came out very strongly through the interviews was that every director had developed a strong relationship with state VR. And in Michigan, we actually had a memorandum of understanding with state VR prior to getting funded for our grant. Hannahville had applied for a grant in 1988. They were not funded. They actually, small band of people jumped in a car when they weren't funded, and they found out where the RSA office was in Chicago at that time. And they drove to the RSA office in Chicago and walked in and asked the people there how they could write a better grant. Of course, they were all in shock at the RSA office with this group of Indian people coming in, kind of unannounced. They weren't used to that style. And so they called the Michigan agency, and the Michigan agency somehow contacted me to come and help them write the grant. But in the meantime, the state agency became aware of kind of the dire straits and the high unemployment and the poverty at Hannahville through their original application. And so there was a catalyst there, and one of the district office managers in the Upper Peninsula reached out to the tribe, and we developed a memorandum of understanding, which it was the first in the country between a tribe and a state agency. And that was in like 1989. And so we've had this relationship prior to the grant, and that MOU still continues today. Even though we've had our grant for 25 years, we still have kind of this cash match agreement where the tribe puts in money and the state matches it 3-to-1 for some case service dollars. And then their counselor comes to Hannahville and works with our visions counselors about one day every other week. So we've had this ongoing bond, and our MOU with the state also says that we will share our training, and on several occasions we have done training. One that was particularly successful was called Walking in Two Worlds, and we did the tribal and the VR side together, and we had people from other tribes come in. It was very cultural, and we haven't done that for a while, but people that for years afterwards, we did 2 of them, people would comment on that, and I would get emails asking when we could do one again. So that was one way of doing it. How about you, Gloria and Tom, and any other directors that are on?
Lori adds, White Earth has invited the State Rehab Council to our reservation for one of their out-of-state meetings. They gave us the full agenda. Our tribal historian and spiritual healer was one of their favorite. We are fortunate to have such a good relationship with them. You just have to reach out to them. They in turn invite us to their trainings. We also have excellent cooperative agreements. And she adds to that, saying we also give them office space when they come to our area on the reservation, and we invite them also to our Disability Awareness Day.
That sounds excellent, Gloria. I know you talked in the interview about this excellent relationship you have with the state. Tom, do you want to add anything?
You know, with the 11 programs that we have in the state of Alaska, there's a variety of involvement as far as the state goes. We, you know, such a large state, you know, geographically, it's difficult to get counselors out. I know in the region that I currently work, our state VR counselor only comes out twice a year, and they only come to the hub communities. So depending on what kind of activities are going on when they come, you know, there could be bad weather, there could be you know, a major subsistence activity going on, like the caribou could be migrating, or the fish, you know, it's time to be fishing. People can't make it into the community of Kotzebue, so they don't have a lot of access to the VR counselor currently. The man that we're working with right now is retiring at the end of this month, so I'm hoping that you know, we can establish a better rapport with our next counselor that's assigned by the state. I know in Juneau, they also provide office space for the state VR counselor, and have a lot of shared cases there. In Bethel, they don't seem to have a lot of involvement with the state. In Nome, they were without a counselor for a long period of time, but I think one has just been reassigned there, so I'm not really sure how that's going. In Fairbanks and Barrow, the counselor that works for the state in that region has been with the program for a long time, and she does a really good job of getting you know, contact with them. I know that the Alaska Pribilof Islands, they have not had a lot of services by the state, so we do provide, you know, individual, you know, when we get a counselor, we try to you know, impress upon them the cultural aspects. Gail is out there, and she works in the Bristol Bay area. She might be able to tell you a little bit more about how it works in her region, but you know, from what I remember, their counselor is based out of Kodiak, so they don't have a lot of contact with them. So it hasn't really, not a big success rate in the state of Alaska as far as the state Department of Health Rehab goes. Sort of only come to the hub communities. So that's how it works there.
I'm not sure if Gail was able to hook in. I haven't seen her name come past here, but Gail, if you're out there, maybe you could type something in to share how you've worked with the state VR.
She's typing now.
Oh, she's typing now. Great. Okay. While we're waiting for her response to be complete, I would like to add something about the State Rehab Council. And as part of the previous Rehab Act, and it continues, the state was required, if there was a 121, Section 121 Tribal Vocational Rehabilitation Program in their state, they were required to have the director or a representative of that project sit on their state rehab council. And if there were more than one project in their state, it would be that could rotate among those directors. And in Michigan, I'm the only project and the only director, and so I have been the only person from the tribe that has been on the State Rehab Council. And I've served on the council, I don't know, at least 12 years or so. And I'm recently the immediate past chair of the council. But I just wanted to say that whoever put that into the Rehab Act, I think had a lot of foresight, because that catapulted somebody from, like in my instance, is really small tribe that few people had heard of in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And all of a sudden, as a representative of that tribe and that program, I had a seat at the table. And I was on par with kind of a government to government relationship with we have a general and a blind agency in Michigan. So the three of us would have equal time to talk on the agenda at every state rehab council meeting. And on two occasions, the council, I did invite them to Hannahville, and they couldn't wait to come, really. They were all excited. And it was really a great opportunity for everybody to experience the cultural experience like Gloria described. We did something similar to that. And previous to the WIOA, there was a requirement in the previous Rehab Act for a person to also sit on the State Independent Living Council. That's no longer part of our act, but that was a very, I think, a change agent approach to making people aware of the independent living needs of Native people. Gail must have replied by now.
Gail adds, DVR will not provide their application page or make it available. And then she follows up with, we requested assistance from Disability Law Center to review DVR application procedure and practice.
That sounds pretty serious.
This is Tom. One of the things
Yeah.
that Gail is referring to is that they're sort of screening the applications, so they weren't providing us with an application to give to folks, and what they, so we're trying to get some clarification from the Disability Law Center to figure out, because anybody should be able to put in an application to state DVR anytime, and but that hasn't been the case in Alaska.
That's quite sad, in my opinion, because in my understanding, any citizen of the state should be, anybody actually, I don't even, if you're living in the state, you should be able to put an application into your state VR agency. And it is such a good resource, I know, for us, because they have bigger bucks than we have.
Right. Just recently, I was working with the tech center in our region and looking for additional funding for clients, and I mentioned to them that they should apply to the State Department of Voc Rehab. And so when the recruiter at the tech center contacted the State Department of Voc Rehab, he told them that they needed to be referred by the tribal program first. And I said, absolutely not.
Sounds like some room for some education in Alaska.
But now he's...
I'm sorry, Tom, I couldn't hear what you last said.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And so anyway, hopefully, Disability Law Center can sort this out for us.
Right, I hope so. Any other comments or questions? Suzanne, do you want to add something about when you were director at Fort Mojave? Suzanne Malson's here with me, making her way to the microphone.
Good morning. One comment I'd like to make is that
I'm not sure you're connected, Suzanne. I'm not hearing you through my headset.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but I'm not getting you through my headset. So.
Oh. Well,
okay.
One comment I would like to make is that
it's working.
When you were talking about RSA Council and the SILC,
yeah, State Rehab Council and SILC,
right?
Yep.
I think it's important to note that whether you are, it's not mandated anymore, but the recommendation would be to continue to be on those councils, because without the voice of the directors of tribal vocational rehabilitation, it will be easy for our population to be forgotten. So I hope that each and every one of you, if you're not on the council, would make some effort to do that. In terms of me being the director and some of the activities that we did to reach out to our population, we had Disability Awareness Day, and we invited RSA. We had a wonderful, and that's where I did meet the director of Arizona RSA, and they all started coming, and also when other travel activities were taking place in terms of other departments, other tribal departments would put on activities, cultural activities, and the RSA would come and join. So we did reach out. We had a wonderful relationship. We were in 3 states, and we, Arizona and California, came to the table when we were working through our MOU. And it was a great process where everybody was just collaborating, presenting great ideas, and so then we had a mutual state-to-state MOU that really worked very well. Thank you.
Suzanne had the challenge of working across 3 states with her program, so everything had to be done 3 times when it came to MOUs and the State Rehab Council and making relationship with a state agency. Thanks, Suzanne.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anything else come in, John?
We have Gloria typing right now.
Okay. Gloria's typing. Maybe I can pose another topic out there. I know there was a question, I think, from Jim earlier about incorporating cultural practices into tribal VR and making it native friendly in terms of cultural things we might have done. And I'd like some additional input on that. And I know Tom contributed quite a bit yesterday about talking about subsistence. And I think that was pretty amazing. And I know Gloria's done quite a bit with her tribe in terms of inclusion of cultural practices and events and writing goals into IPEs for cultural things and that sort of thing. And probably Gail, and I'm not sure what other directors are on. If we could switch and talk about that too, that would be great.
We have a comment from Gloria, and she says, I was under the understanding that the state has no option. If there is a Section 130 project in the state, they have a mandated council position for a member of the tribal VR. I've been on for about 12 or more years. I still need to apply. But tribal VR and CAP have a mandatory member slot on the SRC, SILC, SILC, and SSB.
And Gloria, that is my understanding too. In fact, when I first knew about that requirement, and it was part of our annual report for our projects, and I was not on the State Rehab Council, so I got the information and I called them, and I called the SILC, and the State Rehab Council was a little more affirming, but the SILC really said, well, we don't really need you on our council, we don't really need that input, and they were actually kind of rude about it at the time. None of those people are there anymore. But when I wrote that into my final report, it was only days later that the SILC got a call from RSA that said, you will have this director on your council. And they were very apologetic and called me up, and I served for many years on the SILC. And Maya, one of our counselors, Maya Smith, is serving on the SILC today, even though it isn't a requirement of the Rehab Act anymore.
Yes, it's because of the collaboration between the Department of Labor and the Department of Education under the WIOA new regulations, and that's where all of this not needing directors, tribal VR directors, but again, you need to push the envelope. You need to not take that as law.
And any cost for a director to participate on the State Rehab Council, as well as other members they're all appointed by the governor onto that council. The costs are all paid for by the State Rehabilitation Council. There's no cost to your tribal organization for you to participate in those activities, except the time that you're gone to do so. Other discussion that has come in?
Not yet.
I'm going to go through a few more slides here. This is the table. I think we've probably said enough about this, but table at one point is just kind of a good point for discussion. And I wanted to, while we're waiting for other comments to come in, to talk a bit about how kind of amazed I was when I did the interviews with the 10 directors, but also in all the other interactions that I've had with people over the years, is that I've really been amazed at how in very different and remote settings with little interaction or direction to have to develop a certain model, that we all are doing some things that are amazingly similar. And when I asked directors about this during the interview, they were describing different things, and we all had, particularly in ways that we had addressed, making our programs more Native friendly and taking that state VR model, or at least the information we had about how VR worked in our state, and forming it into something that would work in our own communities, but also the inclusion of Native practices and culture, history, language, however we could incorporate that into our program. That every tribe that I have talked to in the interviews or in other ways has done that same sort of thing. And in looking to see that, how we could document what we've done and how we could, as Gloria mentioned, move towards some more evidence-based practices that we can share with others, with kind of the idea these have worked in many locations. If we look at that from a research model, it really is a model of qualitative research, and it's basically a social experiment model. And this is when different communities, different locales and environments have developed in similar sort of ways, and how that's happened in response without a lot of cross-fertilization of ideas. And that doesn't mean that we haven't had any, because we've all interacted through KNAR, through RSA conference calls, through our drives during rainstorms with other tribal members, or however we've sought to find our own community of directors that are our kind of group and our friends that we can talk in confidence to. But it still has been amazing to me how similar things that tribes have done and how strong our programs have become because of it. And I think that's kind of the start of that documentation of evidence-based practice, because that is our evidence. And that is our kind of report of what has worked. And that was the beginning of the documentation of the webinar on Tuesday, was to try to pull that information together from different places and different locations. And if you remember the list of the people that participated, I mean, there was, southern Mississippi with Mary to, Tom and Amanda and Dallas on the northern slopes of the Arctic Ocean. And from Peggy in Georgia to Sherry in Washington State, and all of us in between, that given the differences in our environment and location, that we're doing some of the same things, and the things that we pulled out is what worked, or those strong ways that we've made our programs Native friendly, and they're working for Native people. And the idea of including the culture, language, and history and teachings of our local tribes have strengthened those programs and the outcome for the people we serve.
Carl, one of the things that I've noticed participating in the talking circles is that we have a lot of young, new directors out there that really would benefit from this webinar and continued conversation. And when I think about my first days
I remember Suzanne's first days.
in Tribal VR, I was asked to create a annual report and a budget, and there was nothing in the office that alluded to either of those documents. And Suzanne Tillman gave me your name and number, and it was a Friday evening, and you were on your way out the door, and you stopped what you're doing, and you sent me all the documents I needed, a copy, so that I could duplicate. And it was like it looked about 10 inches thick by the time I received it. But this is the kind of outreach that we need to continue. And I liked your idea about making it something where you create your community of directors so that you can support one another. And I remember particularly in one of the talking circles that we had a brand new director that was struggling pretty much the way I felt when I first walked in. And the first thing that happened was another director sat across the table and said, "This is my phone number, this is my email, contact me, you're not alone." I think we really need to see more of this, and we do need to create a comfort zone where people can talk and share and not feel like they are going to be victimized by anything. So thank you for this. It's been great.
Thank you, Suzanne, for sharing. And I remember when we first got funded at Hannahville, we were so excited about it. And then I remember sitting in a room by myself in my office and thinking, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? And I certainly didn't want to call my project officer, Pamela Martin, at the time, because I didn't want her to know what I didn't know. So, and I remember going, it wasn't called Kaner at the time, but there was an early meeting of, I think there's about 13 directors there, and I knew no one in the room when I got there, but I soon had help and friendships. And that's one of the things that the directors talked about, was the camaraderie and the friendship and the collegial relationships that directors have formed. And, we all, as we go to meetings and meet other people, we'll find those people that maybe reach out to us as a new director, but maybe there could be some more formal way of making those connections. So as a new director of a new program, or somebody that's taking over in another program and doesn't exactly know how to make sense of things that were there, that we as more experienced directors could make that bridge and reach out to people, or maybe something through AIVRTech could help us do that as well. Other thoughts on that process?
Gloria comments, I remember Dick Corbridge's advice, do not be a copycat program to the state. Yes, we have our federal regs, but he said, keep those membranes in the IPEs semi-permeable. I'll never forget that. Our IEPs, our IPEs many times need to be amended as the person grows in the VR process.
That's awesome to share that, Gloria. Dick Corbridge, for those of you that may not have had the privilege of knowing Dick, was he worked for, was a state director, I think, at one time, and then he was an RSA employee. Anyway, he had been in the field a long time, and he really had a warmth and understanding and a real love for tribal VR, and he did a lot personally and professionally to support the tribal programs, particularly in the western part of the country, where I think he was from the Northeast. I'm not sure. Somebody will fill me in on that. But we joked about him driving around in his motorhome to visit programs, and he really shared lots of information. And many programs today are still using some of the forms that he gave us to monitor our files with, to make sure we were meeting the compliance that we needed to meet with the federal regulations and other forms of program evaluation.
Gloria adds, too, personal testimony is concrete, although still powerful. Jim adds, he is my instructor for TVR 301 online class through Northwest Indian College.
Well, thank you, Jim, and tell Dick hi from Suzanne and I from here anyway, and probably Lee too. Thank you. I heard he was teaching actually. That's really great that it is. Gloria mentioned personal testimony, and I think that's a great thing too that we haven't really talked about is the importance. And I'm assuming you're talking about success stories from our consumers or clients. And we have a collection of those I know at Hannahville, and I do submit those with my annual report, like 1, 2, or 3. And our success stories mostly deal with individual client successes, but I've also done success stories on things we've done programmatically that have worked really well for us, like maybe a new way to do orientation or a way that we've rearranged our advisory group to be more friendly and focused. So that's a good way for us to share too, and we could share those among programs. One thing we did talk about in one of the webinars this week, I think was, or maybe it was at the Talking Circle in Albuquerque, but anyway, the need to have an archive of things that have been produced through our programs or through San Diego State University when many students were out there, past reports that might have been done. And it seems in the past those things have been collected, but then when that project isn't funded anymore, then we don't know where they are. And I still think there's people out there that have some of those old documents, so I don't think it's too late if we wanted to do like a historical archive of reports and documents, pictures, what we have to share about our programs for future people that are be of interest. That might be an AIVRTech possibility too. Couple of other ideas I just wanted to put out there as maybe for future discussion. I did bring this up yesterday, but we focus on the individual outcomes for because that's what we're about, the individual successes and employment successes of the people we serve. But this all is part of what is the Native Nation building, or maybe it's a strategic plan or some type of long-term plan that your tribe might have. And in terms of, one person at a time, is our successes, but that all feeds into the overall success of our tribes in terms of total workforce development and economic development for our communities. Two additional topics, which I've talked a little bit about. One is like the environment that the tribe might find itself in, and actually the topography of the land, how that impacts program development. Many people talked about that, and it was something I hadn't really thought about myself. And it's the idea of how much we have to consider the land and the topography and all of the natural interactions that we have with our environment as part of what our program might look like. Another topic that was brought up during the interviews, I think is a good one for future discussion, is the Americans with Disability Act. It's not an act that the tribes have to follow. Don't have to be compliant with. Most tribes do. But it did come up in a couple of the interviews about the accessibility and how that might be related to cultural ceremonies that aren't always done in what would today's terms be an accessible way. And I think that would be something that would be a really rich discussion too. Gloria
adds, Carol, I think that is critical to retrieve any of this information. And, Gail, I still use AID TAC guidelines. Okay. All right, thank you for that input. So we have a go on that one. I think there'll be a lot of encouragement out there, and see, those could be things that we can talk about at Kena. We're only a few weeks away, and we'll all be in person there, and maybe generate some ideas. And if there's not a formal session, we'll know how to make our own session. I think we're kind of good at that.
kind of the last slide is to look at how we might continue this community of practice. And I'm just going to throw out to you some ideas that we thought about and I've gathered from other people. Continue, of course, with this type of webinar. It's I was kind of nervous about doing the first one, but I would really jump into it again and encourage other of you to get involved and share in this way too. The monthly phone calls, which seems to the other directors thought would be a good idea. And we could do those nationally or regionally or maybe by topic. For example, secondary transition right now is something we all want to know more about. That might be a good topic. And if people were interested, they could call in, say, for that call. An online chat room, meetings at KNAR conferences, AIVRTech talking circles. I mean, I really enjoyed the Albuquerque talking circle that I participated in, and I've heard many other really positive comments from people. And other ideas that you all might have that may be ways that we could all communicate and keep our conversation and sharing going. And some of those could be formal, and I know there's always that informal group of friends and colleagues that gets together and shares too.
Gloria adds, I vote for sure AIVRTech monthly conference calls.
All right. Lee and Suzanne are both here. So they heard that one, Gloria. Any other comments? We're down to just a couple of minutes left. Ooh, I'm getting the 2-minute warning.
Gloria and Carol and group, we've been on top of this since our very first webinar in terms of knowing that conference calls are the comfort zone, and John is working on it, so we're all working on it over here, so keep pushing.
John is the amazing person that, I don't know, he's behind the scenes here, but he makes this all happen and work, and there's wires and cords and 16 computers I'm looking at, but it's kind of amazing.
I'm so happy to do it because otherwise I'd be just in a dark room by myself.
Techies out in the daylight. I'd like to say just the great staff here. I've had a wonderful experience with the webinars this week with talking to all of you. I've done more talking than I think I've done in a while. And anyway, I want to thank you all for joining in this week and joining in today. And there are lots of other people behind the scenes here. We've had help with our PowerPoint from Georgie, who's sitting kind of next to me over on the other side. So we see Suzanne and Lee, but there's this whole powerful staff that is here working and to make this happen for us. And I know we're all excited about having our own training and technical assistance center. So I don't know, Georgie, you want to come and say, get your picture? Suzanne, can you get over here, John? Lee's in his office down the hall, but all right, here's John. Here's Suzanne. Come on, Georgie. And here's Georgie's coming. Wish you could flash a camera to Lee. There's Georgie. She helped a lot with our PowerPoint, and this is a really amazing group here. Thank you so much for participating. I'm looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks at KNAR. Any other questions or follow-up or ideas you might have, you can email Suzanne, Lee, myself, and hopefully we'll all be together in a few weeks at KNAR.
Gloria adds, thank you all.
All right, Miigwech.
All right, we're going to go webinar silent. Thank you, everyone. Please contact us for any reason. Thank you.